cow burps to blame for a changing climate. Some put animal agriculture in the spotlight as global climate talks continue. But just how much is animal agriculture to blame?
We in agriculture have to do our part, but must not be singled out as the 800-pound gorilla, which we're not.
We will hear from one scientist who says carnivores should keep eating meat, along with reaction from different points of view. Plus, we highlight the Nebraska winners in the corn yield contest and an important input.
Trying to help make that easier.
Thanks to a new web app, we'll get hands-on with the new tool. It's time to grow. Does cow flatulence, shall we say, warm the planet? Good evening and welcome to Grow. Not so much the flatulence, but the burps, some say, is to blame during global talks on climate, but others say not so. Wildfires and drought just a few years removed from flooding. Nebraska cattle producers have battled extremes.
There's a changing climate, and every farmer in the state and in the states knows and sees how that looks like.
What Dr. Frank Mitloehner disputes is agriculture's role in creating the problem.
We are one of the very few sectors that can reduce humans' impact on climate. And that is a narrative that's not being told.
The professor from the University of California, Davis, says American ranchers and dairymen are highly efficient and can take further steps to limit their impact. He points to efforts in California to capture cattle emissions and turn it into fuel. He says it's true cattle are the largest agricultural producers of greenhouse gases, mostly methane.
Yes, it's potent as a greenhouse gas, trapping heat from the sun. But if you hold it constant, then almost an equal amount of the methane that's produced is also naturally destroyed.
He argues it stays in the atmosphere a far shorter time than carbon dioxide. His findings put him at odds with other scientists who call for drastic reductions in methane. Environmental groups also accuse him of being too cozy with agricultural groups. His speech in Nebraska, for example, was part of the Farm Bureau convention. He's quick to defend farmers.
We in agriculture have to do our part, but must not be singled out as the 800-pound gorilla, which we're not.
A United Nations report finds the livestock sector plays a big role in emissions, with beef and dairy cattle leading the way. But a so-called roadmap makes no specific recommendation to eat less beef. Instead, it points to the role of improved genetics. It also suggests intensifying production in relevant locations with improved feeding. The paper also emphasizes animal health while pointing out the need to restore pasture and improve grazing. They're hardly controversial ideas and align with what Mitloehner has told us.
That working with farmers rather than against them will get us to achieving the climate goal for the agricultural sector.
And Congressman Mike Flood takes aim at what he calls an anti-beef agenda. In response to the UN report on livestock, Representative Mike Flood taking issue with recommendations to eat more chicken in place of red meat. Flood introduced a resolution in the House pushing back on the report. The resolution calls on Congress to defend the nation's cattle producers while opposing use of federal dollars to reduce meat consumption. Governor Jim Pillen reacting to Flood's statement, saying in part, quote, "In Nebraska, our farmers and ranchers raise their products using sustainable methods designed to protect the land and resources on which they rely. I urge the House of Representatives to pass Congressman Flood's resolution recognizing Nebraska's collective role in feeding the world and saving the planet." End quote. Meanwhile, Humane Society International out with a statement condemning what they call industrial animal agriculture. In their words, quote, "The rising global consumption of animal-based foods negatively impacts health and breaches multiple planetary boundaries, namely climate, land use change, biodiversity loss, freshwater use, and nitrogen and phosphorus pollution, thereby increasing the risk of disease." So that's a look at what animal rights groups are saying. Nebraska's ag director signing on to a letter raising concerns about a rule allowing the import of beef from Paraguay. The letter, signed by agricultural leaders in 8 states, urges the USDA to pause the rule until a risk assessment has been completed. They say that hasn't been done since 2014. The groups say they're concerned about the spread of foot and mouth disease. The letter reading in part, quote, "The U.S. should not open our markets to potentially unsafe actors and jeopardize the herd health and livelihood of American farmers until a more up-to-date risk assessment is conducted in Paraguay," end quotes. And as you tune into the National Finals Rodeo, it might make you hungry for some Nebraska beef.
From the sand hills of Nebraska to the green wheat pastures of Oklahoma.
The Nebraska Beef Council has partnered with beef councils in Oklahoma and Texas to sponsor the National Finals Rodeo on RFD TV. During the 10-day event, you've seen Beef, It's What's for Dinner brand represented with a TV commercial paying tribute to beef producers and their dedication to raising quality beef. And yes, it includes footage from Nebraska. The Beef Council says beef is at the center of NFR celebrations, and the ad campaign reinforces the long-standing connection between rodeo and ranching, reflecting pride in raising beef and celebrating ranching communities. How would you like to raise 623 bushels of corn an acre? The National Corn Growers Association Yield Contest has yielded a new record. David Hula of Charles City, Virginia, set a new national record over 620 bushels per acre. In the top yield category, the average across the country was 269 bushels an acre. And let's take a look at Nebraska results. If we look at no-till irrigated corn, Dalton Peterson of Bertrand with 317 bushels, followed closely by Ted Schrock of Elm Creek and Paul Kenny of Amherst. All three planted Pioneer. In the strip or minimal tillage category, Nicholas Jerebeck of Farwell did well, outpacing the competition with 357 bushel corn using DeKalb seed. Conventional irrigated in Nebraska, Bob Panowitz of Caro, 10 bushels better than anyone at 334, followed by more Petersons from Bertrand, Rocky with a pair of seeds coming in at 324 bushels, and Matt at 320. Nebraska's economy is expected to expand modestly over the next couple of years before accelerating in 2026. That's the prediction from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Bureau of Business Research and the Nebraska Business Forecast Council. Researchers say high interest rates are expected to slow the state's economic growth in 2024 and 2025. They also predict employment will grow 0.6% next year before accelerating to 0.9% in 2026. A new digital tool makes it easier for growers to know how much to fertilize. Nitrogen fertilizer is a costly input and farmers want to be efficient. Plus, there are environmental concerns, as we know, with several areas of the state that have local groundwater management due to high nitrate levels. Instead of spreadsheets and paper forms, the University of Nebraska has a new, easy-to-use web tool.
And so this is a predictive tool and really allows users to put in information that's custom to their fields, specific to their fields, and get recommendations for their unique situation. And so trying to help make that easier, trying to help them manage that, like you mentioned, a very a high-priced input, and very important and critical for high production, and important to consider how we can manage it well for environmental considerations as well.
It's mobile friendly, and who among us doesn't use a smartphone anymore? This is web-based and easy for even those who aren't super tech savvy, and one of a number of approaches the university is taking to help producers be more efficient.
This is a easy to use, straightforward calculator that should be very accessible to the masses. And then we have more precision-based tools, things like sensor-based management or imagery-based management, fertigation, crop models. So those are also, wonderful options that can do even more fine-tuning of nitrogen management. So part of really a suite of tools that are available for growers.
Producers can input data from multiple fields and then save their data. Developers say they can adjust the app on their end, and they're looking for feedback to improve it. Up next, we talk taxes with a policy focus. And as we mentioned, still to come, we'll get hands-on with that new nitrogen tool.
We're gearing up for this week's Sports Extra. This Friday on NTV News at 10. Sports Extra, our team covering your team.
The impact of property taxes, especially on agriculture, is something we hear about frequently in this state. And the candidates for District 33 in the Nebraska legislature are split on how to address the issue, with some putting a focus on valuations.
Property tax valuations are a critical issue, and so those are things that we have to look at and address, because as valuations go up, taxes go up.
Senator Halloran spoke to me about the EPIC option during the Adams County Fair, so I've been delving into that option to see if that may be the best way to go, and I'm also familiar with Governor Pillen's option.
Well, the EPIC option is a huge thing. I'd love to see the day where we don't have property tax, income tax, inheritance, sales tax, and with a viable solution, the consumption tax to replace those all.
I think it would help bring businesses in because of the corporate tax relief. It would help people who are coming into the state to buy a home.
And Governor Jim Pillen telling Grand Island business leaders he feels the EPIC tax would be a job killer. Pillen made his remarks during a forum sponsored by the Grand Island Chamber of Commerce. He was asked about the possibility of a consumption tax. He said Nebraskans would do business out of state, which would hurt local retailers. Pillen said his focus is on property taxes, saying he's been meeting with farm groups and others to address those rising taxes.
And our photo of the week. So Linda shares a couple of firsts. First combine ride of the season and first calf of the season. That's Aisha and her niece Hazel. And how about those Carhartts? It doesn't get much cuter than that. And if you've got photos to share with us, send to nebraska.tv/chime in.
Our Grow Weather Outlook is next.
The holidays are here, and that means delicious holiday treats. We have some fun ideas to add to your menu. Thursday on Good Morning Nebraska.
Well, the latest drop monitor that was released this past Thursday morning. Obviously, still have very dry conditions here across the Central Plains. Get a closer look now at the state of Kansas, where no drought stands at roughly 9.25%. Admirably dry stands at about 90.75%. Unfortunately, a slight deterioration from last week, about 1.5% there. Moderate drought for the state of Kansas, roughly 66%, about 1.75% going the other way, unfortunately. But the good news is the rest of these categories remaining the same from last week's report. Severe drought, roughly 30.5%. Extreme drought still stands at about 7%. A couple of spots that are littered across the state. And exceptional drought, still none of that across the state of Kansas, which is a good thing. Of course, moving up north to Nebraska, now we're also had a couple of slight deteriorations from the last week. Looking at no drought, roughly 57.5%. Admirably dry now stands at roughly 42.5%. Both of those roughly a 2% deterioration from last week. Otherwise, these rest of the categories remain the same. Moderate drought, roughly 27%. Severe drought, about 20.5%. Extreme drought, still about 11%. And exceptional drought, still at about 3.71%. Kind of a bullseye there still across the central Nebraska. And we have gotten a little bit of rain this last week. And hopefully, by next week's report, it'll look a little bit better for us. Looking at the December temperature outlook here, this also remains unchanged from last week. Much of Nebraska, really all of Nebraska and Kansas, expecting above average temperatures, at least for the rest of the month. Looking at precipitation totals, still pretty average precipitation totals for pretty much all of Nebraska, excluding the extreme southeast corner. Also some above average precipitation totals there for central and eastern Kansas. Otherwise, looking at average totals throughout at least the Central Plains, pretty much Next 3 months, looking at about above average temperatures for much of northern and eastern Nebraska, as well as the extreme northeast sliver there of Kansas. Otherwise, near normal temperatures or average temperatures expected for the rest of us for the next 3 months. Looking at the precipitation totals for the next 3 months, too, still slightly above average precipitation totals, which is a good thing considering the drought situation that we have. Maybe average precipitation totals there for extreme northeast Kansas as well as extreme parts of northern and eastern Nebraska. Looking at your Grow Almanac for the week ahead, normally we see high right around 37 this time of year. Normally a low around 18 the week ahead. Average high of right around 50, so quite a bit warmer as we enter the season of winter later on in the week as well. And the average low this next week right about 27. And here is the Grow week ahead. Starting off a little cool, temperatures in the 40s, but quickly warming up into the upper 40s and low 50s the rest of the week. In fact, 54 Friday, looking pretty nice, at least for right now. It could change over the next week or so, but we'll keep a close watch on that. A slight chance of precipitation Thursday. Otherwise, the rest of this week looking pretty dry for us overall. Your Grow proverb for the week: after a warm autumn, as we've had, comes a long winter. So I guess it's just a matter of time to see how long Old Man Winter will stick around this coming winter. Well, that is a check of your Grow weather report. Stay tuned next week when once again it will be time to grow.
Still to come, we honor a venue familiar to FFA members, and we're getting hands-on with the university's new nitrogen management tool. A new tool provides growers an easy way to calculate how much nitrogen they need. We got online with Extension educator Laura Thompson for a walkthrough of how the new web tool works.
I've got an 80-acre field. I've got my soil texture, my expected corn value, my yield goal. One nice little feature we've added here is how to calculate a yield goal. And I think that's sometimes challenging for producers to really think about what's a reasonable yield goal to expect. And so this relies on their past yield history. So a nice little addition that we brought into the tool there. If they've sampled their soil for nitrate, they can put that information in that they receive back from the soil test lab. If not, we'll use default values for them. So if they don't have that, that's okay too. Previous crop, manure, irrigation. So all these things very custom to what each operation is doing. Then down here, we get into our nitrogen management programs. And we've provided a couple templates for people. If they know that they're going to do kind of a split application or spring or fall or kind of what that looks like. But then we can also build custom management programs. And so that's what I put in here, where I know I'm going to put 10% in side dress and 90% in through spring and starter fertilizer. And so they can build those custom programs that they can use in their operation. And so that's what you're seeing here is kind of the details, the nitrogen sources, the expected prices. And that's really what the users need to input. And so pretty straightforward. It should be information that people generally have available, or if not, we do have those defaults in place. And then they'll just hit calculate, and this is going to be their result. So here I'm seeing my recommended nitrogen amount, the cost per acre. And then here is kind of a new feature, a couple new features we've added. And so here you're seeing the amount of fertilizer that's going to be needed for that whole field. So this should really help with making purchasing decisions, save you one step of doing some of those calculations to determine how much total fertilizer is needed and what from each source when you go to make those purchases. And then here you can see our nitrogen requirement per bushel of grain. And so we've kind of got this set up so that growers can benchmark where they're at. And we've kind of got this green zone where things are in pretty good shape, kind of a warning zone in yellow, and then a more critical warning zone in red. So this is designed to help people think about where they're falling in that efficiency spectrum and see what that looks like for their field. And like I said, we can set up different fields and compare different management programs, maybe move some more nitrogen to side dress or consider fertigating.
I've got it up on my phone and it actually looks like it's pretty mobile friendly.
And that was really one of the critical feedbacks we heard. It needs to be user friendly, it needs to be mobile.
So if people want to find this tool, what's an easy way to track it down?
Well, growers can learn about the tool and access the tool from CropWatch. We're very interested in hearing from producers what they like about the tool and what they'd like to see in the future so that we can keep building the tool and making it more and more useful for growers.
An organization focused on leadership, especially young leaders in agriculture, celebrating 55 years of service. Since 1968, the Leadership Center in Aurora says their main focus is to give back to the communities around them and help young people achieve success in their careers and personal lives, including a whole lot of FFA members. Not only do they want to help visitors, they say they enjoy helping their staff as well.
I love that they're learning that as young people because, you know, you spend the better part of your life working, right? And not everyone has that at their workplace. So if we can show them what that looks like now, I just think, how cool would that be that they bring it into another place?
Part of their mission is educating others by teaching life skills, hosting special events, creating internships, and learning how to serve the community as well. Normally at this point we would be honoring our Farm Youth of the Month, but this time we're honoring the Leadership Center for 55 years of service to building up those Nebraska youth, and I know a lot of you out there certainly have some special memories and connections to the Leadership Center. Well, that's going to do it. We'll see you next time as we see how agriculture makes Nebraska grow.
NTV's Grow is brought to you by Aurora Cooperative. Tougher together, Aurora and you.